The annual harvest celebration at River's Edge Vineyard was supposed to be a joyous occasion for my family, but as my father announced that my younger sister Andrea would be taking over as CEO, everything inside me froze. My name is Jessica, and for the past 35 years, I've dedicated my life to building something real, something I could call my own. While Andrea enjoyed the luxuries provided by our parents, including a free MBA, I worked tirelessly in my investment consulting firm, growing it into something I was proud of. But when my parents called me in desperation 6 months ago, claiming that the vineyard was facing foreclosure, I didn't hesitate. I transferred $850,000, my entire life savings, without even asking for a written agreement. I was saving our legacy, the family business that my grandfather had built from the ground up. In return, my father promised me that I would be taken care of and that my investment would secure my place in the family business. Little did I know that this act of faith would cost me everything. I watched Andrea stand before the crowd, glowing in her designer dress, as my father praised her for her business education. She had never worked a single day in the fields. She was clueless about the vineyard, but to them, her education made her the natural choice to lead the family business. Meanwhile, I had sacrificed everything for this moment, giving my all without asking for a dime in return. The sting of betrayal ran deep as I sat there, silently toasting to my younger sister's success. When I excused myself from the celebration and stepped outside, my heart raced. This wasn't just about being passed over. I had been duped. I knew I had to act. I pulled out my phone and texted Rachel Thompson, a corporate lawyer I had met at wine industry events. She was a no-nonsense lawyer, ruthless and sharp, and now I needed her expertise to navigate the financial manipulation my family had orchestrated. Rachel met me the next day in her sleek downtown Dallas office, looking at the documents I provided with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. We quickly discovered that not only had my parents taken my money without a single formal agreement, but they had also planned to strip me of my place in the business altogether. They had been working on a new company, River's Edge Holdings, which they planned to funnel assets into, leaving the original vineyard, a vineyard I had saved, with nothing but empty promises. Rachel's plan was straightforward: demand the money back with interest and leverage the financial records to force them into submission. The game had changed. I wasn't just going to fight for my place in the family business. I was going to take them down. The demand letter went out, and my father's reaction was immediate. Andrea called, enraged, pleading that I was going to ruin everything. But I stood firm, knowing that the truth was on my side. My father's attempt to manipulate me failed, and his desperation became evident when he offered me a co-leadership role with Andrea. That was the final straw. This wasn't about power, it was about justice, and getting back what was rightfully mine. Then Michael, the vineyard's accountant, reached out to me with damning financial records. The $850,000 wasn't just used to save the vineyard. It funded lavish personal expenses, Andrea's Mercedes, their Tuscany vacation, and more. The betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. Michael was ready to testify, but the risk was too great for him. He wanted to distance himself from the mess. Andrea, always the drama queen, continued to escalate things. She texted me, desperate, accusing me of trying to destroy the family. But her words no longer had power over me. My resolve was hardening, and I was ready to take everything back. The 48-hour deadline loomed, and my parents, now fully aware of my investigation, scrambled to find a way to settle the matter. But no matter how hard they tried to avoid it, the truth was out. My father called, his voice trembling with anger. But I stood my ground, knowing that I had every right to demand what was owed to me. He made his final attempt to guilt-trip me into backing down, but I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. At the last minute, they capitulated. My father signed the agreement, agreeing to repay my investment with interest. But this wasn't just about the money. It was about making them face the consequences of their actions. The vineyard, now under the bank's oversight, would never be the same. Andrea, with her MBA and all her ambitions, found herself sidelined, with no leverage to continue her lifestyle. In the aftermath, I secured the Marshall Creek property, a new vineyard across the valley from River's Edge. It was the perfect location, with fertile soil and the potential to produce top-quality wines. With Michael by my side as CFO, I was ready to build something of my own, something that would rival the vineyard my family had once owned. My mother continued to send me weekly messages about healing the family, but I had already made peace with the fact that my family wasn't what I thought it was. They were just people who shared my DNA, and for years, they had manipulated me into thinking I owed them everything. But I didn't owe them anything anymore. The real victory, though, was the old leather-bound notebook my grandfather had left me. It was filled with his handwritten notes on the vineyard, on the soil composition, and on the grape varieties. His final words, written on the last page, were simple but profound. The grapes don't care about fancy degrees, Jessica. They care about love and hard work. I felt his presence with me as I stood in the middle of my new vineyard, ready to plant the first vines. This was my legacy now. In 3 years, the grapes from Sunset Valley Vineyard would be producing their first vintage. It would be a direct competitor to River's Edge. But I didn't care about their approval anymore. I had built something for myself, and that was more than enough. The true lesson in all of this is that family isn't always the ones who share your blood. Sometimes it's the people who respect you for who you are and what you've accomplished. And the best revenge? It's not about getting even. It's about thriving and succeeding on your own terms. As the sun set over my vineyard, I couldn't help but smile. I had everything I needed now, my own business, my own future, and my own legacy. And I would make sure that no one, not even my family, could ever take that away from me again. Doi jai laban kich ban ja juok morong, voin hiu tin tiet va tin huang, jelam cho kau chuyen them fan hap dan vasusak. The annual harvest celebration at River's Edge Vineyard was in full swing, but as my father announced Andrea as the new CEO, the words echoed through the barn like a slap in the face. Welcome to our annual harvest celebration. My father began, his voice smooth and confident as always, but my hands trembled around the wine glass I had raised to toast. Today marks an exciting new chapter in our family's legacy. We're thrilled to announce that Andrea, fresh from completing her MBA, will be taking over as CEO. The crowd erupted into applause, but there I sat, frozen, my stomach nodding in disbelief. My name is Jessica, and at 35 years old, I had spent my life building something real, something I could stand on my own. I ran an investment consulting firm, worked 60-hour weeks, and learned the value of hard work and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Andrea, my younger sister, had lived a completely different life. Her MBA was paid for by our parents, and she never had to lift a finger. She was the free spirit in the family, flaunting her designer dresses and Instagram photo shoots while I built my life from scratch. 6 months ago, my parents had called, desperate. The vineyard is facing foreclosure, they told me. We've over-leveraged, and we need your help. Without hesitation, I transferred $850,000, my entire life savings, into the vineyard's account. The vineyard, our family legacy, was on the brink of losing everything. I didn't think twice. I just wanted to save it. But now there I was, watching my sister bask in the applause, standing in front of everyone as the new CEO. She'd never worked a day in the fields, had no real knowledge of winemaking, but apparently she had the right credentials. I excused myself and stepped outside, the cool evening air doing little to calm my nerves. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a contact I never expected to need. Rachel Thompson. The ruthless corporate lawyer I'd met at wine industry events. I needed someone who could help me navigate this mess. The next morning, Rachel met me at her downtown office. Her gaze turned serious as she reviewed the bank statements showing my $850,000 transfer. Let me get this straight, she said, looking up from the papers. You transferred your entire life savings without any written agreement? I could feel the bitterness in my words as I replied. They're my family. I didn't think I needed one. Rachel leaned back in her chair, considering my words. And now they've made Andrea CEO, despite your investment? She asked. I nodded, my stomach tightening. They promised me a future here. They promised me a secured place in the family business. Rachel's sharp mind was already working. I think we have a strong case for verbal fraud. Let's start with a demand letter. We'll request the return of your $850,000 plus 8% interest within 30 days. We'll also ask for all the financial records since your investment. I suspect we'll find some very interesting decisions made after they received your money." As Rachel outlined her plan, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't just the dutiful daughter. I was a woman with a plan that would hold them accountable. The demand letter landed like a bomb at River's Edge. That afternoon, Andrea called me, her voice shrill with panic. "A lawsuit? Are you insane? You're going to destroy everything we've built." I let her scream, remaining calm. "The solution is simple," I replied. "Return my investment with interest, $850,000 plus 8%, or we can go down a different path." She paused, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. "You can't prove anything, Jessica. Verbal agreements are complicated." I smiled. "Actually, I just got off the phone with Michael. Remember him? Your accountant. He gave a sworn statement about the day I made the transfer. He advised putting our agreement in writing, but Dad dismissed it. It's all there in black and white." The line went silent. Then, "Hold on, Dad wants to talk to you." My father's voice came through, strained and angry. "What are you doing to us, Jessica, after everything we've done for you?" I cut him off. "Let's talk about everything you've done for me. While you paid for Andrea's education, her MBA, her car, and her apartment, I built my life. I earned that money while she was posting Instagram photos. You promised me a place here. That was the deal." He tried to change tactics, his voice softening. "Sweetheart, be reasonable. The Vineyard doesn't have the liquid capital for that kind of payout right now. We'd have to take out another loan." I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. "Then start talking to banks. You have 25 days to pay me back. Otherwise, I file the lawsuit, and everything gets publicly scrutinized, including that new Mercedes Andrea's driving." The phone went dead. "The Vineyard doesn't have the liquid capital right now." His words echoed in my mind. They were so used to manipulating me, so used to keeping me in my place. But now I had control. A week later, I sat across from Michael at a quiet cafe. His face was tense, his hands clutching a thick folder. "There's something you need to see," he said, sliding the folder across to me. I opened it to find detailed financial records showing how my $850,000 had been used for personal expenses. Andrea's Mercedes, a delivery vehicle, their trip to Tuscany, market research, even Andrea's MBA, partly backdated as employee education expenses. "They used my money for all this?" My hands tightened around the folder. Michael nodded grimly. "They've been siphoning money off the Vineyard and into their personal accounts. They've also started transferring assets into a new LLC to protect themselves from any legal repercussions. If you want your money back, you need to act fast." I had already seen the signs. My family wasn't just dismissing me. They were systematically trying to cut me out. That evening, I received a text from Andrea. "Family meeting tonight. Don't bring your lawyer. Last chance to fix this like family." I knew what this meant. They were going to try to manipulate me again. But this time, I was ready. Rachel and I worked quickly. Instead of filing immediately, we sent an amended demand letter, giving them only 48 hours to repay my $850,000 or face an investigation that would open their books to public scrutiny. This time, the stakes were higher. This wasn't just about money. It was about making them face the consequences. The next few hours were tense, as I continued to receive texts from my parents and Andrea, trying to guilt me into backing down. But I held firm. The moment they refused, I knew I had them. Within hours, I had a new offer on the table. The bank had agreed to take control of the Vineyard, and they offered a loan that would help my parents recover, but only if they agreed to full transparency. This was my moment. At the last minute, my mother came to my office, holding a manila envelope. She was visibly shaken. "Your father's had to be sedated," she said, slumping into the chair across from me. "Are you happy now?" I didn't touch the envelope. "This wasn't about making anyone happy," I replied. "It's about making things right. I want my money back, or I'm taking everything public." She begged, "Please, Jessica, think about what you're doing. You'll ruin everything." I glanced at the Marshall Creek listing on my laptop. "You're right, I'll ruin everything. I'll ruin your perfect little vineyard. And when I'm done, I'll be building something better, on my own terms." And just like that, everything changed. 2 months later, I stood on the newly purchased Sunset Valley Vineyard, overlooking the river's edge property. With my $850,000 investment safely returned, I had purchased a new vineyard across the valley. It wasn't just the land that mattered, it was the potential, the chance to build something of my own, something they could never take away. Andrea's vineyard was a sinking ship, burdened by debt and poor financial decisions. My own vineyard, it was thriving. Michael had resigned from River's Edge, and I hired him as my CFO. The first harvest would come in 3 years. By then, Sunset Valley Vineyard would be a direct competitor to River's Edge. As I stood there, feeling the cool breeze against my face, I realized something profound. I wasn't just building a business, I was building a legacy. And this time, no one would be able to steal it from me. The story of Jessica didn't end there. As time passed, she felt more and more the difference between living life her way and living up to her family's expectations. Sunset Valley Vineyard wasn't just a career move. It was a turning point in her personal life. With everything she had gone through, Jessica learned that freedom wasn't just a concept. It was the right to live a life true to herself, not bound by toxic relationships. As a year passed, Jessica had completely transformed. Her position in the wine production industry became solid, and those around her, from her dedicated vineyard staff to investors, all admired her decisiveness and talent. On those long evenings, sitting at her desk in her office, looking out the window at the vineyard, she couldn't help but reflect on the career she had built from scratch. She remembered all the times her family had belittled her, all the times she had endured their mocking words about her failure, and all the times her self-esteem had been hurt by those she once called family. But now when she saw her vineyard thriving, the ripe grapes, the first bottles of wine being produced and sold, Jessica felt that everything she did was absolutely worth it. Things changed quickly when a big investment firm from another state set their sights on Sunset Valley. Jessica received a call from a new partner, someone with vision and power in the wine industry. "We want to partner with you. With Sunset Valley's quality, you could take it international," they said. Jessica didn't immediately feel overjoyed. She knew that every opportunity came with its own challenges. But what mattered wasn't the deal she just signed. It was when she thought of her family, the people who had never once acknowledged her worth, who had never believed in her abilities. And now those same people were running a vineyard that had once been her grandfather's legacy. Her grandfather's teachings stayed with her. "The grapes don't care about fancy degrees, Jesse. They care about love and hard work." Jessica thought about that as she moved forward, taking control of her own vineyard, no longer waiting for her family's approval. Months passed, and she felt a growing sense of pride in what she had achieved. However, her family's manipulations weren't far behind. They started making calls, attempting to pressure her into reconciling, but Jessica no longer cared for their apologies. She'd been in the driver's seat for long enough to know her own worth, but things weren't as simple as just business. Rachel, an old family friend, had been there for Jessica when the situation became too overwhelming. She had received new information, documents and statements that showed how deeply her parents had manipulated her. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. With Rachel's support, Jessica moved forward. As the weeks passed, her former family tried everything to stop her, including using guilt and threats. But no matter what they threw at her, Jessica was unfazed. Every move she made was calculated, and her eyes were always on her goal. When the demand letter went out, her family scrambled to try to negotiate, but it was too late. They had underestimated her. Jessica's cold response and clear understanding of the law left them no room to wiggle out of their obligations. Her father's reaction said it all. For the first time, he realized the magnitude of Jessica's power. Not just her financial acumen, but the fact that she was done being their doormat. He finally saw his daughter, not as a child to manipulate, but as a woman who had earned her place. In the end, Jessica's family chose survival over pride. They gave in, but at a cost. As Jessica watched the negotiations unfold, she knew this victory was just the beginning. She had built a new life for herself, one where she was no longer just someone to be used. She had earned her place, and no one could take that from her. 1 year later, Jessica stood on her newly purchased property, Sunset Valley Vineyard. The view of River's Edge across the valley was just the icing on the cake. She had turned the $850,000 she had fought to get back into a down payment for a new vineyard that would directly compete with her family's. The grapes from this vineyard would rival the best of what River's Edge produced. As she stood in the vineyard, her grandfather's old notebook tucked into her jacket, she felt the weight of everything she had done. In the next 5 years, she would be competing with her family's legacy, but she no longer needed their validation. She had built her own legacy to leave behind. And just as she looked over the rolling hills of her new vineyard, she couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting free. As you reflect on Jessica's journey, do you think it's ever too late to take control of your own destiny, even when it seems like the world is against you? How would you have handled her situation with family manipulation and betrayal? Drop your thoughts and comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on taking charge of your future, no matter what challenges come your way. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, but about building your own legacy.